thank you very much, everybody, for coming along today. It's nice to see you all. For those that don't know me, haven't spoken to me, I'm John Wilson. I'm from Community Matters, based for a change in sunny Yorkshire. Yeah, that really is unusual, especially at the minute. So today we're going to do a workshop, a discussion about different types of governance structure that you might choose to adopt for your forum, and look at some of the benefits and, I don't want to say sort of issues, but it might be that there are with the varying options. So how it's going to work, I have a presentation. I will go through that. Please, feel free to stuff questions into the chat. I will get to them, but I would prefer to do that at the end, if you don't mind, just because if I try and do it in the middle, I will lose my place and get lost. And I don't think that's a good idea all round. So if we do that, that would be helpful. Plenty of time at the end for questions, and I suspect there will be plenty of questions. There always are. I think that looks about right. Helen, is the waiting room reasonably empty now?
It is, yeah. We've got just one person who seems to be struggling slightly getting in. It's one of our members of staff, so she can always watch the recording back next week. Okay.
That sounds to me like you're saying they don't count.
Not in the slightest, not in the slightest. But I know that she has struggled with issues with Zoom before.
Okay, terrific. So without any further messing around, I'll share my screen. I'll check with somebody that you can all see it, and we'll get underway. Okay, Dawn, only because you turn up on my screen, can you see the slide that's up on there?
No, John, I can't, because the way I am set up, it's not designed for me to be able to do that.
Doesn't help.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, thank you. The reason I do this always is I did a workshop a few weeks back, and I was 3 slides in and nobody could see them, and I hadn't checked. So here we are. We're going to talk about governance, not the most riveting of subjects, unless you're a bit of a geek about it, but I'm sorry, I am. So what are we going to look at? We're going to look at unincorporated associations, which will be registered and unregistered charities. We're going to look at incorporated charities. So that'll be charitable companies, which you probably wouldn't bother using, but hey, for completeness, we'll look at it. And CIOs, or charitable incorporated organizations. Also going to look at CICs, so community interest companies, followed by a bit of a serious look at the differences between CIOs and CICs. And as a final piece, I've got a little bit about what you do if your forum is hosted by another organisation. So your chance to look at a number of things there. So where do we start? Whoops. Here we go. So charities. So what makes a charity? Well, actually, what makes something charitable is the type of work it does and the objects. That's part of the things that are set down in its governing document, its constitution, which explains why it exists. Charities are not always registered with the Charity Commission. In actual fact, there is no requirement to register a charity with an annual income of under £5,000. People might decide to because it has some decided advantages. However, to register a charity, you need to have that annual income of £5,000. CIOs can register with less. have a board of unrelated trustees, or a committee, if you prefer, of unrelated people. And you have to complete the registration form on the Charity Commission's website, which is reasonably straightforward, but very slow to work its way through the Commission's bureaucracy. So what's this unincorporated thing mean? Well, the best way to describe an unincorporated association is, imagine a group of friends, like-minded people get together, they want to do good things, and they sit round in somebody's kitchen and drink coffee. There you go. They decide that in order to do good things, they need to have a few rules that explain how they're going to do things. And that's it. That's an unincorporated association. And there are some really good things about it. It's incredibly quick to set up. You just have to decide to do it. Can often apply for charitable funds, so apply for grants. Might even be eligible for charitable reliefs. So that's where, maybe you don't pay tax, or if you have a building, you get reduced rates on that. Now, there are some absolute real issues. Number one, there is no limitation on the liability for the trustees and members. Remember, it's this group of people sitting around the kitchen table, drinking coffee, etc. If something goes catastrophically wrong, all of those people are personally liable for whatever has happened financially, with no limitation on that liability. And the way it's legally laid out is there are now what is called jointly and severally liable. In other words, let's say somebody took a court case against the forum, or whatever the organisation is, and because the forum doesn't exist in its own right legally, which we'll get to in a moment, the person bringing the case can look around and say, well, there's, 20 members, so we can sue all 20 members. But if one of them would appear to be much more wealthy, have more assets, so instead of suing 20, we'll just sue the one we've got the best chance of getting the money from. That's what it means. Very scary. However, let's put this back into perspective. For a very small organisation, the level of liability you have is equally small. It's only as an organisation grows that it really needs to move away from that thing about being unincorporated. But moving forwards, let's look at this other thing. The organisation doesn't exist legally. This forum doesn't exist. It's just a group of individuals who come together to do good things. That means it can't hold a contract. So you actually can't, the forum, the organisation can't employ a member of staff. The person who employs that member of staff would be the member of the committee who signs their contract. That's a personal liability, potentially. Trustees, or as you'd call them, committee members, can't usually be paid or employed if that is a registered charity. So if you're registered with the Charity Commission, you cannot pay in terms of a salary people who are on your committee. So nice and easy, but a lot of potential issues being unincorporated. If we think about the next thing, is think about organisations that are incorporated. So instead of being that group of friends, like-minded people sitting around the kitchen table, suddenly the organisation exists legally in its own right, independent of the people involved with it. Okay, so here you go. So instead of it being over here with all those nice people sitting around it, you've got Like the picture on the right, you've got a nice building. Yeah, that's the organisation. It's totally independent of the people who are working with it and for it. So it provides, that structure provides protection for the members and trustees, and their liability is limited in most circumstances to a sum listed in the governing document. That's usually something between I've seen figures between £1 and £15. So if everything went totally, absolutely wrong, in the first instance, all the money the organisation has is used to pay off any debts or what was accrued. And then that figure of between £1 and £10, £15 from each member is then gathered to pay anything else off that needs to be paid off. But that is the limit of their liability. You can't be chased for any more in most cases. We say the organisation exists in its own right legally. So suddenly it can hold contracts in its own right. You can have a contract with the local authority. You can employ staff, and it's the organisation then that employs the staff. So it's nice and simple. Talking about incorporated charities. So obviously, yes, can access charitable funds, but it's still got this thing around trustees can't usually be paid or employed. So committee members can't be paid or employed for doing that role. Charitable companies are where an organisation is a registered charity, but it's also a company limited by guarantee. Not something I would expect a forum to undertake unless it's been around a very long time and somebody dealt with this a long time ago. I'll quickly rattle through it. There isn't very much you really need to hold on to, but it's been around a long time. There's lots and lots of case law. If something happens, yeah, it's quite good if the organisation wants a mortgage. Probably wouldn't, because any things like that are listed on their record at Companies House. But it has two regulators. It's regulated both by the Charity Commission and by Companies House, and the sets of regulations don't always line up. Companies House also levies fines for late filing, and if you still don't manage to do it after they've levied a fine, they prosecute the directors. CIO, so Charitable Incorporated Organisation, is a much, much newer structure. It's only been available since 2012. Finally, somebody sat down and said, it's good for organisations to be incorporated. It's crazy that we have to have it done by two separate regulators. Excuse me. It might potentially be hard to get mortgages as the data about borrowings aren't shown on the Charity Commission record, although really it's not the case because most charities, they borrow from quite specific lenders. Really great, a single regulator, one set of papers to file every year. Currently, the Charity Commission doesn't levy any fines for late filing. They are incredibly tight. If you're late sending your paperwork every year, they do this really terrible thing. They actually put your record on the Commission's website in red to say you've been naughty. But that's the limit of what they do. And something that's quite useful is there's a single registration number on all documents, because for these sorts of types of governance structure, you're required to put your registration numbers on all things like letterheads, on the website, on publicity. Now, CICs, Charitable Incorporated Companies. Again, it's a fairly new structure. It was really designed for for-profit types of organisations that had a social purpose. Its main reason for existing is to deal with organisations that trade, that sell products, services, items. And there are many different types and versions. Some allow directors to receive dividends. So it's instead of being paid, they get a profit share. They pretty much all allow directors to be staff and paid. They have an asset lock, so that in the event of closure, remaining assets are passed to an organisation or a community listed in the governing document. But a very large number of charitable funders will not give them grants. The reason being, because of the different and large number of types of CIC, many funders do not have the time or capacity to actually go through everybody's documentation to see whether it fits properly, or they just make a blanket decision they won't fund CICs. So with that in mind, let's look at some of the key differences between charities and CICs. So in a charity, the trustees, or the committee if you prefer, can't be paid staff. That's not strictly true. They can be, but it requires a special permission from the Charity Commission. In CICs, directors, yeah, they can be paid staff. That's not a problem. Within a charity, trustees can be paid out-of-pocket expenses. And although there is, or should be, as good practice, a requirement to provide receipts for those expenses, you can set your what you call out-of-pocket expenses quite widely. It might be, everybody immediately thinks of travel or subsistence. So if you've got to be out for the whole day, it'd be quite reasonable, to have lunch. But it could be childcare. It could be other things. Do you need broadband, if you like, in order to function as a committee member or a trustee? Then that's a reasonable expense. Charities broadly do not pay tax. Pretty much charities do not get involved in tax at all. CICs do. CICs pay corporation tax on any surplus they hold at the year end. That's come in during that year. If it's not spent in that year, it's taxable, even if it comes from a grant. And corporation tax is 20%, it might be 20 or 22% at the minute. There are things you can do to reduce that, but it just pushes the problem into the future. The only thing that you don't pay in a CIC corporation tax on is personal donations. So if you've rattled a bucket at an event, that's fine, that's a donation. Charities can apply to pretty much any charitable funder. That's why they exist. And obviously, as we've already said, CICs are barred from applying for lots of grants for the reason that I explained earlier. A charity is regulated wholly by the Charity Commission. There are currently no sanctions for late filing. CICs are regulated by Companies House. It's a very light touch regulator, but there are fines and other sanctions for late filing. If you want to think about transparency, I know some PCFs have issues in their locality with other groups thinking that perhaps they are not the most the obvious people to be running a service. If you're a charity, your accounts, and that's full accounts, and your annual report are published online. They are open to anybody. For a CIC, whilst you have to do a special form as a CIC that lists some of what you've done during the year, the level of accounts information is much, much reduced. It's actually very light. You don't have to provide very much at all. That might or might not be an issue for people. And finally, those that are hosted forums, are hosted by another organisation. Well, governance is less of an issue, really, because really the governance is covered by the host organisation. You are a little unincorporated body that meets, that's looked after by a big organisation. The only thing I say here is I would say it's important to have really early conversations and reach an agreement about who does what. It's also really important to consider what happens if and when the forum becomes independent and agree who owns what, i.e. the data, and what would happen to any staff or anything else you think is important. Yeah, have those conversations early, get them written down. There is no definitive that is what will happen, but at least if you've had the conversations, there is some documentation around it. Yeah, you've got a starting point when you get to that point. This is something that has caused a number of difficulties. So that's the end of the slides, and Helen will share those later. And I'll now take any questions. I'll have a quick look through, through the chat. We seem to have quite a few in the chat already. Okay, let me, right. Right, okay. Can trustees now? Right, okay, I think I'm at the beginning. Sorry, okay, we'll start here. Committee members, also known as trustees. Yes, it's just an interchangeable term. If it's a charitable company, they're also called directors, just to make it even more confusing. It's the same thing, just different names. Yeah, unincorporated associations can be eligible for gift aid. It's a requirement that you make an application to HMRC for that. They will then decide whether they think you should have it or not. Much easier, obviously, if you're registered as a charity. Yeah, trustees can know each other. They just can't be related. Yeah, and it becomes an issue sometimes, and I've seen not in PCS, but in other types of organisations where trustees have actually been related to staff members. That's something that you have to be aware of. In charities, the idea is that you separate the strategic and the operational management of the organisation. So strategic is where is the organisation going over the next 3 years, whatever. Operational is how do we get there this week, next week? Yeah. Right. What else have we got? I don't know what CIC level is. I'm afraid, Rachel, you might have to elaborate what you mean on that, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Or I can do it now. Go on.
Oh yeah, you know, it was in reference to when you were speaking about charities and stuff. I'd kind of got a bit confused, but I think it's sorted itself out now. But thank you so much, John.
That's okay. Yeah, I've just done the unrelated trustees. Basically, not related, not family. You can't have a set of committee all drawn from the same family or numbers of families. Yep, can change to CIO. Yes, if you're a limited company, you should be able to change to a CIO reasonably promptly. If you're a limited company that is already a charity, that's really quick. If you are a company limited by guarantee but nothing else, you can convert to a CIO. And again, if you keep the documentation reasonably standard, it should be a fairly quick process. Yeah. Yeah, unrelated. Okay. Yeah, husband and wife could both be trustees. However, is not a great way to do it. It depends how many trustees you've got. If you only have 3 and 2 of them are husband and wife, that really means they control what happens. And that is incredibly bad. And the commission wouldn't be overly pleased about that. I mean, if you've got a board of 10 and you have 2 are related, that's less of an issue. Right. CICs are not required to have a steering group or a reference group. Yeah, it really depends absolutely on how their governing document is written. They usually only talk about directors and meetings of directors. If you want to have, you can have a CIC with a wider membership. So you can have members and elect directors. Yeah, that would be fine. It depends how you set it up to start with. Yeah, the lottery will fund CICs, but the lottery is probably the most highly resourced grant funder in the UK. They have lots and lots and lots of grant managers and people who can take the time to look at grant applications. Most other charitable funds do not have that level of resource. And as I said, because of the vast number of different types of CICs, many of them take that view that rather than mess about, they just blanket don't fund them. Okay. Liability insurance. It depends what sort of liability insurance you're talking about. If you're talking about trustee indemnity insurance, that is a decision you have to make about whether you think it is important. I have to be honest, I don't remember seeing a policy for trustee indemnity that's paid out. I would probably say that it's way cheaper to be incorporated and not pay the indemnity insurance. The point I would make is that even incorporated, if your trustees or your committee are negligent, they would not be protected. And the easiest way to explain negligent is, say your committee met for, 18 months. Nobody in 18 months turned up with a finance report or explained how the finances were doing. And at month 18, you discovered that whoever the treasurer was, or the member of staff, has decamped with all the money to live it up in the Bahamas. All right. I know most forums would not get past Bognor, but use that as a view. They would quite rightly say you had been negligent in that instance, and that protection would not apply. Excuse me. Yep, absolutely. Some sort of agreement with your host. Absolutely. I would say it was necessary, but we don't always get there. Consider the forms. Well, yes, they can consider. Hosts could consider a project of themselves. It depends how it was set up to start with. There are some quite large organizations, they run it as a project. And if that's what people want, that's absolutely fine. If they were just brought in to host the forum for a period, unspecified, then I think having a discussion and perhaps setting out some of the ground rules, regardless of whether it stays a project, ceases to be a project, becomes independent, doesn't matter. But it means people have to have some of those conversations, especially about the things that become difficult in the future. Okay, in order to claim back VAT, you would need to be VAT registered. there are specific regulations for VAT and charities. And I'm going to be honest, I am not an expert, and I can't remember. I think you don't necessarily get it on new builds. You do get it on renovations. If Rachel, if you want to get in touch with us, I can put you in contact with somebody who will be able to answer that way better than I can. As an unincorporated group, how can you access things which require a charity number? I'm afraid you've answered your question. You can't. You have to register as a charity. But it's not a particularly onerous job to do. Yeah, the reporting isn't particularly onerous once you have that. Okay, so if the Chupi's situation had been in question, the host offered a settlement agreement to the paid worker. What right will the existing employee have to come back to the forum? So one assumes the host will have covered their own butt for any kind of... Okay, this is slightly outside the scope of governance. And I actually think it is a difficult one. And I would suggest it's probably better for me to talk to Dawn separately afterwards or at a later date. You know, Chupi's quite complex. It's around the transfer. If a piece of work continues, but it changes the people who deliver it, paid staff have quite often a right to transfer with that piece of work. If the original host has made an agreement with them, then I would assume that would be to take on their redundancy. Right. As a CIO, how difficult is it set up as an employer? It's really easy. You just, as an employer, that means running your own PAYE. So you're dealing with a payroll. You just tell HMRC and they will set it up for you, or set the procedure up for you. You then have to use either somebody to do the physical payroll for you and outsource that, or do it yourself using software or the tools available free from HMRC. Okay, what can you do if a data processor, data controller in a host organization, when does this pass to the steering group, such as on admittance of a voted chair, for example? I think it very much depends on what structure you've set up, and that would need to be part of your agreement with the host about the transfer of the data processor. That's why, yeah, I'm very keen that people should sort these things out in advance, or at least set up a steer about what might happen in the future. Okay, relations. So you can have a trustee and a staff member as long as it's made known. And could we pay the staff member a salary as long as we put it in our constitution? Right. Okay. Let's staff members can on occasion be trustees. Before you do that, yes, it needs to be allowed for in your governing document, and you must get explicit permission from the Charity Commission. I will also say they are not keen to give it for some very sensible reasons. Their view is that that person will be conflicted when you discuss staff salary. Yeah, they're not a disinterested party. They would have to move themselves out of the meeting. That might, if you only have a small group of trustees or committee, might make difficulties there. But it is possible. As I say, be prepared for a long and uphill battle with the Commission on this. The Commission's view is they want to see that separation between strategic management and operational management. I don't know if that properly answers your question, Chenda, but feel free to come back to me outside of this. And yeah, I'll happily talk you through it. I think if your host refuses to engage in an agreement, it's very difficult. And it's why I would say really, it's something that needs to be done right at the outset to start that on. It's hard to deal with it later on. It's reasonably easy to become incorporated through a CIO. That is a possibility. Or through a company limited by guarantee. That's very quick. Equally, CICs are incorporated as well. So any of those would do. And it's a fairly, I will say, straightforward process. I'm not going to say it's easy. It's easy for somebody like me. I do it regularly. But it's not massively difficult. And yes, you can apply for it. So somebody's saying if they've got a constitution, they're unincorporated at the moment, they're thinking about becoming registered. Can you apply for more funding from different organisations if you're registered? Yes, you can. A lot of charitable funders, they say they will only fund registered charities. I'm going to say, okay, somebody said, would an incorporated company be a better move rather than to go straight for charity status? I think it would be as easy to go straight for a charitable incorporated organisation. That is in effect the same thing. It's an incorporated body, wholly regulated by the Charity Commission. I think rather than becoming a company and then converting at some point, I think it'd be easy just go straight for that CIO. It will take a period. The Charity Commission is currently running, but they used to say that an application took 12 weeks. It's currently in excess of 18 at the minute. But if it's straightforward, it goes through faster. We're in the process of trying to do something that will speed that up a bit as well. So again, okay, right. I'm gonna go, Anita. You've asked me, could I answer the rest of your question? I don't know which part I missed. Could you unmute yourself and just ask it? That will be way quicker.
Yes, sorry, John. It was just regarding, we have a group of 5 trustees and a group of 5 steering group plus some volunteers. And we have one of our steering group and one of our trustees related. Is that allowed? And could, if we write to the Charity Commission, could they possibly agree to have the steering group member be employed?
Okay.
Thank you.
Depends. You say you've got trustees and a steering group. As far as the Charity Commission is concerned, they're only interested in the trustees. That's the first thing. If you've got somebody who's on a steering group and is related to a trustee, that doesn't really matter. That's about your internal governance. If you want, let's say somebody who's not a trustee, but let's say that steering group person to be a paid employee, you would have to tell the Charity Commission that the employee was related to a trustee. And they would take a view on that, but you would have to ask that question of them. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I'm the trustee involved, which is why I'm asking that question. It's my daughter that's in the steering group, so I was just a bit concerned about it.
Yeah, I think that's fine. You would have to do that. With that sort of relationship, it will be a slightly easier sell to the Commission.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay. Somebody says staff self-employed, being a community group, no holiday pay or redundancy, it's DFE grant. Did not cover these. Well, that's an agreement you have with them, being self-employed. I would assume that as an organisation, you have ensured that those people are truly self-employed and you have some documentary proof that they are self-employed. As a CEO, can we have an operation? Yes, as a CEO, you can have an operational steering group. Oh, have I just actually answered this? I'm sorry, the problem is we have that many questions firing in. I'm having trouble keeping up. I will come back to that if I haven't answered it later. Something. Okay, somebody talking about grant conditions about relatives not being able to sign payments for each other. That is incredibly good practice. Julie, sorry. It's in good practice and really should be part of your finance policy. Yeah, I got to the end. Oh, I think I've got to the end. I think that's everything. What I'm going to say now is, if people have still got questions that I haven't answered, can you raise your hand? And I'll do it that way. It will be much easier, much quicker, and probably way better for Helen to deal with later. Matthew, go on.
Hi, John. Thank you very much for everything. Just very quickly between the lines, you've identified that the CIC is intended to be for a profit-making company, essentially. So the best vehicle for a non-profit company would be the CIO. Is that right? Am I right in thinking that?
That would be my view, yes. CICs were created specifically for that thing. I mean, they're meant to be social enterprises. That's why it was created.
Yeah.
So that's something that it generates money to do social good with. Yeah. So yeah,
much as I'm sure we all struggle to generate money, full stop. I've never spent a minute of my time trying to generate a profit. However, you know, our operational costs are going up and up and up as we've been asked to do more and more. So is that balance between, you know, acting appropriately and transparently as a company and being held accountable? That's what I'm trying to, you know, square that circle a little bit. So a charity and a CIO might be a good vehicle for me.
I think it possibly would be. Charities don't make a profit. That doesn't mean they don't make a surplus.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean they don't pay staff. You know, I understand. Yeah.
I think it's the whole thing is that CICs cannot be charitable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not what they're designed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are designed as a profit-driven enterprise that then reinvests its profit for social good.
Yeah, I think the issue there is that it's meant to be a trading organization, and the truth is, what we're really trading, to all intents and purposes, is the experience of our parents to the last thing I want to do is commodify parental experience, but at the same time that would make the local authority and the CCG much more comfortable, I suspect.
I suspect you could be right. I
Okay.
don't know. I don't think there's a simple answer.
No,
Matthew. I think there are some good benefits to a charitable model.
Yeah.
I think some people can see some sensible leeway in the CIC model that allows them to do things that the charitable model doesn't. And I think that you have to take the one that works best for you.
Yeah.
I have said to Helen, I've got a document. I know 1 or 2 people have already seen this. We've got a draft of a flow chart about what should we be. And I'm going to share that a bit more widely. Please, you know, it's got all the information on it. We might need to tweak it a bit afterwards, and any comments would be gratefully received. But hopefully that might help people think through that decision process.
just a final comment, John, if you don't mind. To be honest with you, this is not high on our priorities list at the moment. with all else that's going on around us. And however, once we get a bit further down the line and have a proposed, a preferred option, would it be possible to contact you directly and have you, support us in this a bit?
Absolutely. I mean,
Fantastic.
you can get in touch. We'll happily have a conversation. We'll give you some information, what have you, over the phone or by email. If you need to go beyond that, then that's a different discussion.
Yeah, but that's fine. It's that initial, because we've been around the houses with this a few times already in the last couple of years. And a company limited by guarantee was what we landed on pre-pandemic. I'm somewhat less inclined towards that now, but it still has its attraction. So anyway, thank you, John. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to be really, now, can I get this right? Is it Yale Edmonds at Sefton? If I've got it wrong, my apologies.
No, that's fine. Thank you. We already spoke quite recently about the CIO situation. I just have a couple of questions. First, we're looking right now to rent an office space or a meeting space. But just thinking about the CIO not being able to go into a contract. So who would we?
No, a CIO can go into a contract. Absolutely can. It is its own legal entity. The issue is for a community group, so one that is not incorporated, that group can't hold a contract as the group. It has to be an individual that actually holds
someone's name. All right, and this along the same lines, I suppose, if we wanted to employ a staff member to do admin, probably, is that something we can do as a CIO? As the CIO?
Absolutely, yeah. And again, it would be the CIO that employs them, not an individual on the committee.
All right, so they can be like an operational officer, but that has nothing to do with the steering committee.
That's right.
All right, that's what I needed to know.
Terrific. Glad I can help. Okay, anything else from anybody? Say feel free to put your hand up, ask. Fiona Ringwood.
As we're a charity, but we also have like a small shop within our offices, and the service users make things for us to sell in the shop. Do we have to have like a separate trading arm for that, or can we just include all the? It's not a lot of income out of our total income, but we at the moment we don't. We just incorporate it as shop sales within all our recorded income, but we don't need to have a separate trading arm for that, do we?
What sort of money are we talking about, Fiona?
Probably, well, at the moment, not a lot, because obviously we haven't been able to open. Probably about 5% of our overall income, maybe sort of £3,000 a year.
That should probably be fine. There are some limits, and it's defined either by a fixed amount or by a percentage that you can do as what's called non-primary purpose trading, which is what that should be fine. I would need to go and look it up.
Okay.
But yeah, drop me an email and I'll look up the numbers for you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else from anybody? Yeah.
Oh, would you be surprised if I piped up here?
Not at all.
I mean, without going into our entire situation, but obviously you have quite a unique insight on that. And my question is, how do we know what we don't know? In where we stand currently as a newly, as in 2 weeks old, unincorporated group, which has suddenly found themselves in the world of dealing with it all. How do we know what we don't know?
Okay, what I would say is because of where you've come from, you almost start as if it's a clean sheet, which is a good starter for 10. You will have to put your own policy and procedure into place. And you need to be shown that you are, okay, for any organisation to protect the people involved, you need to show that to the best of your ability, you have done the best that you can, and where you don't know things, you have sought advice. So, you know you can phone us up or send us emails, and we will try and steer you in the right direction. There are some things you can consider around looking at things you don't know. I'm going to say I would prefer to have that as a conversation with you separately afterwards, if you don't mind, Dawn, just because I don't think it's necessarily fair to put that out for everybody. But it's that you need to be seen to be doing the best you can. And quite often that is a reasonable defence. As long as you have, where you recognise you don't have a knowledge or expertise, you seek that externally. All right. But I'm quite happy to drop you a line, or if you send me an email, and I will pick some of that up with you later. Right, hold on. I saw something pop up into the chat. Okay. Let's see. Admin at. Right, I've just put an email into the chat box there, which will allow you to get in contact with me. It's the general email for the organisation. So any PCF, because of the contract we have with Contact, you have access to all of our online resources. If you don't think you get that at the minute, please email that email address I've just put up and ask Heather to sort you out a login. I prefer emails requesting information or help from us to go via that mail address, because every quarter we do a lovely report for Helen at Contact that says what we've been doing this quarter. And if people come to me directly, I forget to tell the lovely Heather what I've been doing. If you send it to admin, it goes to Heather first, and she knows. And she also makes sure that I do everything that I'm supposed to do. So if you wouldn't mind, it makes my life easier, and I get a lot less earache. So hopefully that will help people. What else have we got? Okay. Fiona, is that your hand still up, or have you got another question?
I have another question.
Off you go, that's okay.
Sorry, we're a small board. There's only 5 trustees.
Yeah.
2 of whom live abroad.
Yeah.
And I would like them to have some sort of governance training, because obviously if they live abroad, they're not fully aware of all our rules and regulations here. Yeah. Is not meeting with a great deal of enthusiasm. There is a course that Directory of Social Change run, which it's half a day or something like that. Do you recommend that trustees do some sort of governance training? Because all these sorts of issues, if all trustees were aware of even general things, it would make it a lot easier for those on the ground who are, dealing with things operationally, which obviously I'm part of that small group that are. If everybody knows what everyone's supposed to know, do you think it's a good idea, or is it just something we have to?
I'm going to be honest. The Directory of Social Change training is usually very good. I have no personal recommendation for it. I've never done it, so I can't give you that. There are other options around that training. In fact, we even do some, but equally, it's not for me to promote what we do in front of everybody else. Yeah, I think it depends very much what you mean by governance training for trustees.
And I personally have done quite extensive governance training as a trustee by Inclusion London. They offer those sorts of training, and I found it very beneficial. And it's just from coming from that place, and working for a new charity, I just feel that it's really important that they have some sort of, because the onus is then on them to go to the Charity Commission website and read all their rules. Nobody's going to do that, are they? Although they maybe should, because there are so many rules and regulations on the Charity Commission. Whether it's just like a general overview or something like that.
I think, okay,
their responsibilities are.
What I would do is my advice would be, with a charity, it is good for trustees to do something that tells them what the role is. Something about what the role of being a trustee is and what their responsibilities are.
Yeah. That's important, I think.
And I think you start there, and they either get very scared and go and do more training,
or leave.
Yeah, that's not always the best thing.
No.
But yeah, I mean, if you want to know more about what we do, yeah, feel free to get in touch. I'd say the DSC stuff is, I understand it is very good. It is well thought of. I think if you've got somebody who is overseas,
they used to live here when the charity was set up, but then they since moved overseas, but are still a trustee. So
I think my problem is that if you want somebody to do training and it's going to be online, then really it needs to be fairly short.
Yeah.
But that's a personal opinion on that. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, feel free to come back and have a chat with me, and it might be I can source some other possibilities for you as well.
I mean, it would be online. That's not a problem. It's just obviously, as you say, not long sessions are probably more advisable.
Yeah, but absolutely quite happy to talk to you later about that. Yeah, just
thank you.
Okay, anything else from anybody? Getting people now sort of deciding they've had enough. Governance is not exactly sort of like bedtime reading. Yeah, if there isn't anything more, I will wind up the session. I will be sending the slides. I'll send that other document over to Helen a bit later. And for anybody else, if you do have questions, please come and ask us. I would much rather you came and talked to us early on rather than come to us when there's a major problem. It makes everybody's life way easier. But hopefully you've all got a fair idea about what the differences are, so you can make a decision about governance. Yeah, that's an informed one. Sorry, Vanessa, you got a question? You're still on mute.
Oh, dearie me. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, just for a little bit of clarity, really, if you were to register as a charity, but you had were a host for them, would you still be able to have that host, or would you then be breaking away?
That would be, as an interesting point, it would very much depend on what the host thought its relationship with you was. Are you an independent body that they provide services to?
Yeah, we are.
That's not a problem. Or do they manage you?
Yeah, I think we are independent. I have tried to get some clarity on this because I'm not quite sure myself. I know they deal with our funding, so we get the funding, but they kind of hold it in a pot for us, and then they tell us how much we've got, and they let us use their building as well.
Yeah, I think it's a requirement to have a sit-down conversation without any preconceptions. Going, what do you think this is? What do we think this is? And what is it really? And try to get something you can all live with.
Yeah, all right, that's good. I like that. Yep. I can work with that.
Yeah. Good. Terrific.
Thank
Okay. Again, if there's nothing else that's popped up, as I say, feel free to get in touch with us if you think of anything. That's what we're there for. I hope you've all found it useful this morning.